This morning, I'm reading a thesis paper from a student, and it was looking at the utility, really the validity. I'll just use utility just as a general exploration word of the short recovery and stress survey. Which is a subjective questionnaire as it relates to weightlifting. And it got me to think that a few weeks ago I had done a private talk for Q&A really for a masterclass as it was relating to Elite Performer Program. And one of the questions was, how do you look at recovery, and how do you measure recovery? And this was largely a general population group, but the overall our overarching concepts really don't change, and a lot of people do use a lot of the different pieces to this. But at the end of the day, there's some things that I think are really, really important before we whiteboard a little bit into 5 major categories. My plan as we start this, I don't know if it'll go to Sage Spa or not, but I'm going to be very broad and overarching of these 5 different ways to somehow look at recovery, to make an attempt to objectify, quantify, and qualify recovery. That being said, I don't know. Maybe we'll just put it here on Instagram. We'll see. Most important thing to appreciate about recovery is what are you going to do about it? If you are under whatever burden of your training model or the organizational setup, et cetera, if there's nothing you can do, don't measure things that you can't do anything about. Now, you can take a quick, abrupt stop there, and perhaps measuring something that you can't do anything about today allows you to have a stronger voice or a bigger seat at the table when you have some significant data to share with others that you think are limiting what you can do about this information. Bottom line is, if your athletes, your clients are not going to participate in these different models, all of them, not just the ones you like or the ones that they think are unsafe for them to participate in, I think there's a better way, and that's just train maybe a little bit more conservatively, so we don't really ever get into these situations where the training and rehabilitation model has to skew more towards recovery than development or stimulative nature. You can do it all at once. I mean, this is really, really when you have a good handle on physiology and neurology, your recovery and training can often be the same when the individual is in certain places. So you have to have a good appraisal of really where you're at, and don't start measuring things if you can't do anything about it. This one I'm not going to say who the coach is because I have an incredible positive relationship with him, so I don't want to paint him in this light. When I first met him in, let's say 2011 or 2012, and he had the team going to a particular event, tournament, and he's like, what can I do for recovery? I said, Coach, how about you stop doing these stupid ass practices and stop beating them into the ground? Remember too, there's only going to be so much that you can control if you're on the performance side, and the coach is going to do what they do, and you have to be reactive. That can be actually very exciting, at least to me it is. Like, if you're going to give me something that is very unintelligent in terms of spending biological resources, we have to then really dig in, not only hopefully have an opportunity to measure, which again, that's what we're going to talk about here today, but also how creative can you be and how reactionary proactively can you be when you know that there's a lack of intelligence or a schedule that is simply incredibly burdened, as it appears to be in something like Major League Baseball. So you have don't measure if you can't do anything about it, but also start to appreciate where you're at in the situation. Very similar concepts, so that you don't go down rabbit holes and don't start measuring things that you can't do anything about, or much less spending money. But more importantly, spending points in the relationship with the athletes or the clients. So we'll talk at this at a very overarching level. as I said, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really important. Recovery from what? When we look at choosing, we're going to talk about overall ways to measure. But when we look at the actual interventions, you should always have a very strong position of we are using this strategy to create this physiological or neurological response. Because when I did measure, that's what the questions I was asking, and that's what the body told me. So this is. We just do this for recovery, or we're doing a recovery day. This is really suspect, very suspect. I think you're probably doing less stimulative things. Doesn't mean you're doing anything bad, but mobility, yoga, stretching is not necessarily recovery if you have no idea that whatever those methods are doing mechanically, neurologically, are answering what the body is looking for, so that they can come back at some point soon and have very intense or very intense training or very reliable performance. I think that's also very important. So let's start number one and go back to that. I think it was his master's thesis that we were looking at, and the first overall category of how you can measure someone's recovery is number one, subjective. And subjective, a lot of people in the sports science community will be very vocal that using things like subjective, which are not super sexy and don't have a big price tag to them, can be just as useful as the things that have some more bells and whistles. Again, I would always say let's look at both because nothing is going to catch the net, is not going to catch everybody. That being said, I think there's some significant utility to using subjective measures. You're just going to ask the person. So you can start number one. Totally independent to any one individual, questionable validity to what I'm about to suggest. How about you just talk to the person? Just say, hey, how are you doing today? Now that might seem odd, but when you have huge groups or the trainer changes every day and there's no connection, having that connection really checks a lot of other boxes. That I'll give you a story, and that player I will mention because I'm very proud of what he's accomplishing in the media department in Toronto. Before I get to that story, those subjective interactions can also be very standardized through different questionnaires. In different cases, we'd like to see that the questionnaire just shows up on somebody's phone in the morning. They plug it in, it goes to your cloud, it goes to your athlete management software or your Google Sheets or whatever it is, and you can always set these things for alarms, where if certain information from the questionnaire ticks off, many different models and quite a bit of research to then quantify performance. And again, that was what that master's thesis was. You can also look at subjective measures post-training when we talk about rate of perceived exertion. And there's a number of different angles you can go, which I will share here. Rate of perceived exertion is big. Rate of perceived exertion is very important through my 10 years in Canada basketball. So not only would we use the questionnaire in the morning, where it's really just a screen, where we're just looking to just see if anybody is deviated from their norm, and then which category of question that would give us the low score, but also if anything is significantly low to begin with, particularly when we talk about mood. Now, these questionnaires were developed well before the current and warranted popularity and certain high value target of mental health. But whenever somebody's player's mood was in the lower scale, it would then give an opportunity, and it wouldn't always be me. The goal, everybody on the staff is psychologists, even though there's some people with very specific sports psychology training. Psychology is just about talking sometimes. It's just about tapping into relationships and connections. Somebody would go and talk to that player just to make sure, hey, maybe they just filled the survey out wrong and they put a 1 instead of a 5, meaning they felt great, but they said they were very very, very quick to snap at different teammates, or whatever the verbiage was on the particular scale that we were using. But getting back to rate of perceived exertion, that's going to be done after practice. We did it after a game, and we use that number for a lot of different things. We also would use it after individual training sessions. You can do this in general population. When you break up your program, particularly if it's a mixed method, concurrent model, you're going to then learn how intense certain types of training, certain types of work to rest ratios, and you have great control over that. In a performance staff, in any sport, even when there is a great relationship with the technical staff, you're still not always going to have complete control, if any, over the intensities of those of those drills. So once you know the coach's drills, you start to code them, and maybe you just take a sample of players. Hey, what was your rate of perceived exertion? And now there's different scales. You have the Borg scale, but there's other things that we've been impressed upon later in my time at Canada Basketball, that there were things that were better. But now the player has to be grounded. The player has to understand what a 10 is and what a 0 is, so that we can then start to appreciate how intense certain individual drills. But when you do it after practice, usually within 20 to 30 minutes after practice, so in case they finished really, really intensely, you don't get this jaded or skewed score. We would look at individual players versus each other. We would look at what the coach thought. So now we tell coach, I need your RPE for the practice. How hard do you think this was? What type of practice did you put out there? Because coach, you're never wrong. You know what you tried to accomplish with this group. So we can look at it like if a lot of the players, we don't look at averages per se, but we look at, all right, lots of players thought that was a 4, coach thought it was a 4, at least what he thought was the right thing, as we try to educate the coach and further screen out for any type of recovery issues. But we'd also want to see if coach thought it was a 7 and the players thought it was a 4. Coach, you lost an opportunity to really bring the heat with these guys and get after it, because based off of this information, we have reason to think that the players could have done more, meaning they could have practiced longer, practiced harder, developed more, in theory. Sometimes it goes the other way. When coach says it's a 4, but player says it's a 7, well, now we got to understand something. Now, is the player injured? Is the player lazy? Is the player hurt? Is the player fatigued? Or are they out of shape? Because they really all look the same. So when you have the players identifying something much harder than what the coach thought, then you have this is something that can be elucidated from rate of perceived exertion. Now, I want to get back to the story. Certainly, particularly when you're dealing with professional athletes, whether they even participate in these types of expositions into what can be perceived as their private self, their private life. Sometimes they just hit the buttons on the questionnaire, or they'll just answer the same all the time. And one day, doing really player I feel very good about the connection with, so I will talk about it. Same thing with the coach. I just don't know. I want to be painted in a not so great light. He put mood was very, very low. But he would be somebody that would put the same score all the time. Javon Shepard, fantastic player from University of Michigan, tremendous overseas career. More importantly now, really having a very, very strong role, not only in the development of basketball across all levels in the country of Canada, but particularly in the media. He's done things with the CEBL. Really, really excited and proud to see what he's doing after his playing career. So anyway, he would always put the same number. So you knew that we're not going to learn anything from what he was doing, but we never bust balls on that, because I'm thankful that they're even filling it out in the first place, that they're not going to be so disrespectful to not do it. Except one day, he was very, very low. And I'm like, very low in mood. So I'm going to always run the model. I'm not going to just assume that he didn't hit the right button, or the slider button slipped. And I said, Jay, what's up, man? He's like, what? I said, no, you doing all right? He's like, yeah, what do you want? I'm like, yo, well, you put a 1 in mood. He's like, no, I didn't. I said, I know you totally did. He's like, no, I put the same numbers every day. And I showed him the phone. And he goes, you actually look at that. And now this is like this epiphany. Like sometimes players don't even think you even care what they're saying. They don't even look at it. I said, dude, I look at this every day. Of course I do. And he's like, all right, put his arm around me because of course he's like 6'7" and I'm not. And he goes, all right, man. And it was just a very strong connection to think that even though he did not find the value in sharing valid information, now he knows and he knew that there was somebody that really did genuinely care for what he was reporting, even though it was silly. He made a mistake and he was trying to just put all the same numbers and really not share information. And that's okay. Like not everything, which is why we need 5 categories in my opinion, because not every single player is going to relate and be grounded to every other form that you find value in. But again, subjective can be very, very easy because it's very, very low cost. Number 2 is objective. Okay, and objective is a little bit fuzzy because you're really just looking at things. You're looking at players' posture. You're looking to see if they're sitting by themselves. Sometimes you can see in their eyes if they haven't slept well. There's not a lot to talk about there because it's kind of like if you know, you know. Objective information can then further act as a screen. Now, we could combine objective with whether we call it 2A or 3 with testing, okay? Now we can look at lots of different things. We can look at all the different measures that are much more objective than what a player simply or an individual says. In the general population, anytime someone's using a toy, is very, very useful to analyze this. Now, the information that is being generated from this toy hopefully is useful, but we're looking at things more like, let's say, resting body temperature, which certain measures. If you're wearing something on your wrist, probably not very useful for temperature. But if you wear it up here or on your finger, you can get some good information on temperature. So if somebody's riding hot, you might have an idea that there is some form of under recovery. We can look at their posture. We can look if they're sitting by themselves. There's a lot of things there that are more subjectively objective, but then when we look at testing, you can look at hand grip, where you will see a useful standard deviation when someone's under recovered. You also, with hand grip, you have an opportunity to look at right versus left, and you do have an opportunity to screen for pain. We can look at vertical jump, where there's less of a deviation. We can look at submaximal fitness test. So now if you know somebody's yo-yo score, you just do the first 4. That can be the end of your warm-up for certain training sessions and or sports. So where is there a standard deviation? Is their number much higher there? The limitation here to testing is that, are they dogging it? And are they taking it seriously? Just like in different situations when they don't take seriously. But I'm not into the boy who cries wolf. We're gonna do what we believe, and if the environment allows for that, then the culture will continue to germinate into this is how we do things. Obviously, when you're at the highest levels with high-level professional athlete, there's not much of a privacy issue here, but when that test for recovery is too consistent, meaning every day, or on days that don't make sense to them. I've seen players that didn't want to do jump tests because they were used to doing it on Saturday instead of Monday. And the player had a good point. He's like, I'm a Pro Bowl level player. I've done this my whole career. Why do you need me to change? I'll do the test. I just want to do it Saturday. That was a little bit of a pissing contest. But again, are we getting the information or are we conforming? Both are very, very important. I'm trying to think any other types of good objective tests. I don't know that using the same tests that we would always use from a movement evaluation is really always going to give us chronic fatigue changes. Acute, yes. Very interesting study from Concordia. I don't know if it ever got published, but you'll see certain movements in the functional movement screen be much more sensitive to change in a negative fashion after a beep test. So, but I would not use something like that to measure recovery. You're not going to see that big of a change at that level. Vertical jump, grip test, some other things you certainly can look at. I don't know that there's research to support this, but if anything, you can see standard deviations, meaning you know what they are when they're at their best day, so you're going to look at who they are today. That can give you some angles on different tests that have a significant neurological component. So we could look at a star excursion or a Y balance. If you don't see any changes, you throw it away. Not that you throw away the test from a measurement standpoint to build out who the person is on their best day, but maybe not so useful for recovery. So objective and testing are similar. Okay, so now number 4, we're going to look at medical. So this is highly impractical, highly expensive, but incredibly accurate. So is there an opportunity to measure lactate? Is there, obviously, anything invasive should have a high standard of safety and application from a highly credentialed individual. So different medical tests can also start to indicate not so much recovery, but did the entire training and recovery process deliver the adaptation that we were looking for? So different, also depending on how you want to define recovery or under recovery. So medical stuff we're not going to talk a ton about because it's not terribly useful to use this on a consistent basis. But one way to start to bridge all of those together is using technology, which, we talked a little bit about toys. There's things that are not toys, but ultimately technology, where we're all looking at the same things. You're looking for markers and significant changes. Different technologies require a little bit more belief in what the technology is claiming to do. And just because something claims to do something doesn't mean it always actually does it, particularly if it's living in a less discerning market like general population. So just because somebody says it's measuring your sleep doesn't actually mean it's actually doing that. It's measuring something, but it doesn't always measure what you think it is. And the proprietary indices, even on technologies that I would find highly useful, they're make-believe, they're made up. So you're really just looking for up and down. You're not looking for that does this number actually tell me something that can be stratified across a group of individuals. But when we look at technology, it needs to be repeatable. Obviously that means reliable. When it's repeatable, it's got to be repeatable the same way every time. Is it portable? Is it practical? Is it non-invasive? And can you then create information that bounces data from one day versus another day? And that's really what all of these things are really trying to do. You have to have an appreciation of who they are when they're great and ready to jump over the moon, and who they are today. And if there's enough of a change, well, then you should be either employing something in conjunction with whatever you have planned or creating a change. So I think general population and athletic populations, there's something you can do with all of these. And as I said, I gave a lot of information here, subjective to start it off, but what we'll try and do is maybe do another 5 videos here on each of these particular topics. I'll change my shirt so at least you won't know if I did it the same day. So we'll talk more on where you can find some of the research, some things that are not highly researched, etc., and start to build out a philosophy on how you're going to know without guessing, because there are ways, but everything here has advantages, everything here has significant limitations as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully we'll be able to get these videos in order soon. And at the end of the day, if you do happen to cross through a particular section of Mobile, Alabama, I'm talking about that Crichton section. Anybody seen a leprechaun? Say yeah.